Welcome to Baseball Seasons 1961, a new era.
Go crazy, folks! Go crazy!
Whether the Yankee Envoys will finally get to the magical 60 mark or beyond makes Choice Sports copy.
In the world of sports in 1961, there was no bigger story than Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris, who side by side slugged their way into the hearts and minds of the American people.
Baseball was the dominant sport, and those two men dominated sports in this country.
Together, these teammates, roommates, and friendly rivals chased each other in history as they approached the legendary Babe Ruth's hallowed home run record.
And there's a high drive. There's one. It is going. It is going. It is gone. How about that? They're standing ovation.
Look back today, nothing ever equaled the Maris Mantle chase in 61.
I, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear
That you will faithfully.
From the start of 1961, history was being made as John F. Kennedy, the country's youngest ever elected president, was sworn into office. From the space race to the building of the Berlin Wall to the dance craze known as the Twist, a new day was dawning. And baseball was also coming to an historic crossroads.
For 60 years, from 1901 through 1960, the two major leagues had each consisted of 8-team leagues, and they played a very predictable set number of games, 154.
But in 1961, that would change as the American League added 2 new teams. The Washington Senators were moving to Minnesota to become the Twins, only to be replaced by a new Senators franchise in D.C. There was also a new team in Los Angeles, the Angels. And as a result of the expansion, the AL would play 162 games instead of 154. The National League was still on a 154-game schedule and wouldn't expand until 1962. But the NL had already changed in a different way. Quicker to embrace racial integration, the league had been tapping into a deeper pool of talent and had won 5 of the last 7 World Series titles, including 1960. That year, the Fall Classic opened at Forbes Field.
Wednesday, October 5th, dawned bright and sunny. It was perfect World Series weather.
Representing the AL in '60 were the mighty Yankees, led by their power hitters Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris. Their opponents from the NL were perennial also-rans, the Pirates. Pittsburgh hadn't been in the series since 1927, when they had been pounded by the famed Murderers Row Yankees, led by Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig.
The 1960 Yankees showed up for that World Series with the idea that that was going to be another of their 4-game sweeps, just the same as they had done to the Pirates in 27.
But these Pirates proved much more difficult to put away. Led by Mantle and Maris, the Yanks outscored the Bucks 55-27 in the series. But in the bottom of the 9th of a classic Game 7, Pittsburgh's Bill Mazeroski shocked the baseball world.
We just will never forget that moment. Anyone who was there, or any of the players that participated in that game, will never forget that sight with that ball clearing that fence at that time. It's just like it happened yesterday.
For the Yankees, it was the most painful of defeats.
After the Yankees lost that World Series, I wandered into the Yankees clubhouse. I looked over, and Mickey Mantle was sitting there. He had his uniform top off and just his undershirt, so to speak, and he just sat there because he had to pinch himself to feel out whether or not this really happened.
He was actually crying in the clubhouse. He was embarrassed that Pittsburgh beat us.
Soon, the blame was pinned on the colorful but aging Yankee manager, Casey Stengel.
There is a program that's going on with the Yankees, and it has an annuity program, and the annuity program means that after a certain length of time, some people think you should retire.
Stengel had long been considered a master motivator, a genius who'd led New York to 10 pennants in 12 years. Now, as the 1961 season approached, the Yankees had to recover from a tough loss in the series and the loss of their skipper. And while the team still had high expectations, there were serious questions about whether they could reach them. As the Yankees assembled for training camp in March 1961, they were greeted by a new manager for the first time since 1949, as Ralph Houck had replaced the legendary Casey Stengel.
That spring, there was a lot of writers came to me and said, what did I learn from Casey? And I said, well, nothing. I how to manage my own way.
But Houck was very different than most expected, as the former war hero did not have a military approach in mind on the diamond.
As a World War II Ranger and winner of the Bronze Star, the Silver Star, and the Purple Heart, people think of you as a pretty tough guy. Are you going to be a tough manager?
I think, Tom, that I'm going to be a ball player's manager.
Houck had played with or coached most of the '61 Yankees and was well acquainted with their roster. His first change involved Whitey Ford, a Yankee since 1950. Ford had been long considered the game's top clutch pitcher.
Question is, if there's one game you want to win, who do you want pitching it? And the answer consistently was Whitey Ford.
Many felt that Stengel had cost the Yankees the 1960 World Series by not starting Ford in the opening game against Pittsburgh. So while Ford shut out the Bucks twice, he wasn't available to pitch the 7th and deciding game.
That 7th game, which we lost 10-9, I said, that's the game I should be pitching. I was so damn mad.
Learning the lesson from the Pirate loss, Houck was determined to get the most out of Ford. During the previous regular seasons, Stengel had often held Ford back to pitch against the league's toughest lineups. The new manager had other ideas.
Well, what happened with Ralph, it was funny. He said to me, could you pitch every 4th day? And I says, you're damn right I can.
Houck knew that the other key for the team was Mantle. His approach to his top slugger was more psychological.
When we come out of spring training, Ralph had told me, whatever you do is what we're going to do this year. I was really up, like a high school football player, you know, you can get up. And he started making me feel like that I really was the best there was.
Many thought Mantle already was the best. A Yankee since 1951 and the driving force behind their latest dynasty.
He threw better than anybody ever threw in baseball. He hit baseballs further than anybody had ever hit in baseball.
He hit these long, majestic, towering fly balls. Seemed like miles and miles away.
Mantle hit the high fly ball. It's deep left center field. It's way out there. It's way out there, and it is in there. I mean it's in there.
I mean, you can close your eyes and watch him speed over the outfield and make patches over his head. Mickey was just somebody who was amazing. He was amazing every day.
Mantle's resume included a list of historic feats. He had already won the Triple Crown, back-to-back MVPs, and would end up with more home runs in the World Series than any other player.
There's one to base there. It is going down.
And the list could have been even longer. It seemed as if the Mick could do anything except stay healthy.
He hurt his knee in '51, and he played the rest of his career without a real good leg.
He was always in pain. He always had something wrong with him.
He'd get a massage every day before the game, and then he'd get this elastic foam rubber and wrap it from his ankles to the cheek of his fanny on both legs and go out and play.
I can remember one of the New York papers running a photograph of Mantle with an arrow and a medical explanation pointing to every place in his body where he had been injured. But the remarkable thing was, in spite of all that, he still was having those 300 seasons and those 40 home run years.
An ailing leg fails to stop Mantle.
He did it all, and he did it all on a bad leg.
As Mickey went, so went the Yankees. And when they needed him, he was there, even if he had to play with his legs taped from ankle to hip.
It was like he just ignored the injuries. They could slow him down, but they couldn't stop him at all. He was still doing heroic things.
As 1961 started, Whitey and Mickey did their best to carry the Yanks, with Ford off to a strong start and Mantle hitting 9 homers in the season's first 18 games.
There's one.
They proved just what Ralph wanted, that they could carry a ball club, that if the team wasn't hitting or playing good defense or running the base well, Whitey would keep you in the ball game. We were down by a couple of runs or tie late. Mickey would come out and win the ball game with his bat.
But as brilliant as Mantle and Ford were, the rest of the Yankees were struggling. In late May, the team was in 4th place, barely above 500. And as the legendary Bronx Bombers struggled to get back on track, they faced more competition than ever, as with expansion, baseballs were flying out of the park at a rocketing rate.
1961 was a great offensive year, like all expansion years are, because you have at least 10 pitchers in the big leagues that probably aren't big league pitchers.
In Minnesota, Harmon Killebrew was crushing the ball, as was Jim Gentile in Baltimore, who even hit 2 grand slams in one game. Meanwhile, in Detroit, Rocky Colavito and Norm Cash were both launching tape measure shots. Teaming up with the always dangerous Al Kaline, the Tigers scored runs in bunches and took over first place.
The Motor City men currently lead the American League Pack by 3.5 games.
If the Yankees were going to pass them, Mantle was going to need help from a fellow slugger. And as the season wore on, that slugger would give his superstar teammate more than anyone could have imagined. 1961 may have been an expansion year in the American League, but it was the National League that was bursting with talent, as a large number of Black and Latin players were assuming prominent roles. This emerging group had won 8 of the previous 10 MVPs, and this season, the Pittsburgh Pirates hoped that their star, Roberto Clemente, would make it 9 out of 11.
As far as his arm, there was none better. I've seen him take a ball off the fence in right field and throw a strike either to home or third base. He could hit with power. He could drive the ball as good as anybody. He could do it all.
On his way to a batting title, Clemente would stay hot all year, but it would soon become obvious that he alone wouldn't be enough for the Pirates to repeat as champs or even compete with the National League's star-studded squads like the San Francisco Giants, whose imposing lineup featured the monstrous Willie McCovey, the 1959 NL Rookie of the Year.
Willie McCovey, stretch, was a ferocious, immense, powerful hitter.
And Orlando Cepeda, on his way to leading the league in homers and RBIs, gave the Giants another dangerous young slugger. And then when you included the incomparable Willie Mays, it seemed almost unfair.
He's the best player that I ever saw. You want to hit home runs, he did that. Steal bases, he did that. Threw you out, he did that. And he did it with a flair.
You knew when you went to the game that he would do something spectacular.
Something spectacular early in '61 was hitting 4 homers in a single game.
It was May's day in Milwaukee as Willie found his page in the record book.
While the Giants stars held bats, the Dodgers' big names were on the pitching mound. Don Drysdale was a proven force on the hill, and now the blossoming of teammate Sandy Koufax gave L.A. a pair of aces.
He was always plagued by control difficulties in the late 50s, and all of a sudden he found his control and he became just dominant.
Blessed with a curveball that buckled batters' knees and a fastball that could be heard but not seen, Koufax started collecting strikeout victims in bunches.
There's no question he was in a league of his own. There was just no chance. We had no chance whatsoever. He just blew us away.
One team that seemed unlikely to blow the National League away was the Cincinnati Reds. The Reds hadn't won a pennant since 1940 and had finished 1960 28 games out of first place. From the outset of the '61 season, however, it was clear things were going to be very different in Cincinnati.
All the players took practice in what they call instinct shooting. It was a lot like skeet shooting, and what it was to train you on hand-eye coordination.
And somehow it seemed to work. Reds pitchers Bob Perky and Jim O'Toole started winning, and the team got an unexpected boost from a newcomer named Joey J, who had won just 9 games with the Braves the year before.
The biggest difference was coming to Cincinnati is they gave me a chance to pitch.
Jay would take his chance and run with it, as he became the unexpected ace of the staff. And if any of the pitchers did give up a dangerous blast, center fielder Vada Pinson could often be counted on to track it down. And while the speedster had emerged as an all-round star, there was no doubt who was having the greatest influence on the Reds.
Frankie was fearless, and he was an intimidator. He wanted to intimidate everybody. Frank stood right on home plate, and his elbows were right over top of home plate. But one thing about Frank, if you pounded him in, if you hit him, if you knocked him down, he was going to get up and make you pay for it.
He would take one off of the arm. You could not move him off of the plate. He just would battle you and battle you and battle you, and he would not give.
And it wasn't long before the Reds took on Robbie's combative spirit, as they stood toe-to-toe with the National League's best and didn't give an inch.
The biggest thing of all has been the fact that the guys think they can win.
The season was just heating up, and the Reds were going to be a team to be reckoned with. If the New York Yankees were going to make a run at a title in 1961, they would need someone to help Mickey Mantle. That someone, most all observers agreed, had to be Roger Maris. The Yankees had traded for Maris prior to the 1960 season, and he had rewarded them by winning an MVP while often protecting Mantle in the lineup.
It was the first year of Mantle and Maris together, Roger having come over from Kansas City. And I think Roger Maris allowed Mantle to finally have a guy on his own team batting behind him who would take a lot of the pressure off Mantle to win every game.
This year, it'd be Mickey's turn to take the pressure off Roger, as manager Ralph Houck had Maris bat in front of Mantle. With Mantle now protecting him, Maris would get a steady diet of fat pitches to choose from.
Pitchers would do anything to avoid facing Mickey Mantle with a man on base.
Well, I know it helped him a lot, me hitting behind him. You know, I don't think he got one intentional walk that year.
By mid-May, Maris shook off a slow start, and an historic home run race had begun.
The ball is on.
The M&M boys, as they were known, weren't just hot, they were sizzling. By the end of June, Mantle already had 25 homers, Maris 27.
Mantle and Maris, dial M for murder.
Well, we as ball players, we couldn't wait to get to the ballpark to see who would hit one next. They were so hot every time Raj went to bat, or Mickey. You anticipated a home run. I think it took a lot of pressure off us, the rest of the ball club.
And soon, the whole team was hitting homers at a record pace.
What a shot that was.
You got to remember Moose, too. Your 3 M's, Maris, Mantle, and Moose.
Soon, Big Moose Skowron, Yogi Berra, Johnny Blanchard, and Elston Howard all joined the home run parade.
Man, Ellie really tagged that one.
With a record 6 players on their way to hitting 20 homers, the 61 Yanks were a latter-day version of Murderer's Row.
No amount of runs was safe. You were leading 8-0, 9-0, 2 out, 3-2 in the 9th inning. They still would come up with 10 runs and beat you.
And they were almost as good with the glove.
They had one of the great infields of baseball history. Bobby Richardson at second, Tony Kubek at short, and Clete Boyer at third.
Meanwhile, with a record-tying 8 wins in June, Whitey Ford was in the midst of a Cy Young campaign.
He painted the corners, he painted the shoulders, he painted the knees. He was the Picasso of pitching.
From June 1st on, the Yankees would win 70% of their games. Manager Ralph Houck's toughest decision might have been deciding who to bat fifth.
I was hitting the ball pretty good, and so he batted me behind Roger Maris and Mickey Mantle, then me. You know, I felt pretty good about it. I thought, holy cow, he thinks that much of me, you know. So the game starts. Roger goes up and he hits one about 420 feet in the right center bleachers. That's nice, great. Okay. Mickey hit the next pitch about 460. 2 pitches, the guy's got 880 feet. It dawned on me. Uh-oh. Now it's my turn. Sure enough, he hit me dead in the head. Next pitch hit me dead in the head. And I said, hey, Skip, I don't mind batting seventh. And he just broke up. He started to laugh. You don't want to bat behind those 2 guys? I said, nah. No, bat me 7th or 8th. I enjoyed it back there.
The Yankees had gotten red hot, but as the summer of '61 rolled on, things in New York were about to get even hotter.
Roger Maris and Mickey Mantle of the New York Yankees. They're standing baseball on its ear with the home run mayhem they're committing on the American League.
As the summer of 1961 rolled on, the great home run race intensified.
That ball has gone way back.
Soon it began to dawn on the baseball world that they were both on pace to break the game's most sacred record, 60 home runs in a season, set by the legendary Babe Ruth.
Roger Maris and Mickey Mantle were chasing God. There was never a figure in the history of the game as significant, as overwhelming, as powerful, as adored as Babe Ruth.
If anyone appeared destined to break the Babe's revered mark, it was the Mick, the iconic Yankee hero of a new generation. Not Maris, a mere transplant from the Kansas City A's.
It's amazing enough when one guy tries to break it, but here you have 2 players on a team trying to break the greatest record of all time.
As fate would have it, Babe Ruth's ghostwriter and good friend, Ford Frick, happened to be the commissioner of baseball in 1961. And with Mantle and Maris ahead of Ruth's home run pace after the All-Star break, Frick decreed that if Ruth's mark was not broken by game 154, equaling the length of the season that Babe had played in 1927, any record set thereafter would only be placed alongside Ruth's in the record book.
What it did do was just drag people into this controversy. Who's going to do it? Will it be recognized?
What happens is this. During the middle of the season, 20 reporters come. A couple weeks later, it's 40, and then it's 60, and then 80.
One of the great early events of the media society was the Maris Mantle Home Run Derby. And suddenly television had arrived, and as it arrived, it amplified this thing, and the whole country could see it.
There's a drive. Oh, man, he tagged that one, and the photographers are happy. They finally got him.
It was the perfect media storm, with Mickey and Roger at the center.
Roger was from Fargo, North Dakota, and he was a very bashful guy. Roger didn't want all that publicity.
How about the home run situation, Roger? You're 7 games ahead of Babe Ruth's record. Do you think that you can beat the Babe's record?
Well, I don't think so, Bob. Of course, I'm not going to shoot for it. Babe had a...
Here's Maris. He doesn't like being at the center of this. Mantle loved it. I mean, Mantle should have been on a Broadway show, would have loved it.
I wanted Mickey Mantle, and this is Mickey Mantle, so you can applaud him right now.
Mickey was the gregarious, funny, outgoing, kidding around guy. He also had the look. I mean, he was a very handsome guy. When he smiled, he was like a movie star.
The blonde bomber, boyhood freckles, arms of Popeye, mythicized by the press. You know, he had the entire package.
As Labor Day approached, Maris was slightly ahead of Mantle in the home run race, but way behind in the popularity contest.
I know that he sensed that the fans and the media wanted Mickey to win, and that was tough.
The real irony was the better he did, the more the Mantle fans began to resent him.
Mickey became the golden-haired boy, and I came the other guy. You know, I'm glad for Mickey that it worked out that way. On the other hand, I had to feel a little sad because I was getting the other side of the stick.
Back in the realm of the clubhouse, Mickey was also king.
The teammates really had an emotional connection with Mantle. Players related to him, loved him, saw him as a warm human being. He was one of them.
Mickey Mantle was absolutely the greatest.
The great number 7, Mickey Mantle.
Especially with his teammates. If you were Mickey Mantle's friend, you were a friend for life.
And the biggest beneficiary in '61 was Roger Maris.
There was a lot written about me and Roger not liking each other, and that's the farthest thing from the truth that it could ever be. I don't think we ever had an argument. We appreciated each other.
Both Roger and Mickey respected each other's performance under that enormous pressure. And finally, in that '61 season, they actually got an apartment together.
I can remember he used to come in, slap me in the head, wake me up, and he got the paper, and he said, "Hey, Mick, wake up," said, "We're fighting again."
I think Mickey probably helped him more than anybody, because Mickey's been through the glare of the New York media and through national pressures too, and I think that's the reason they roomed together.
As the season wound down and the pressure grew, Maris and Mantle continued to share the spotlight. But a dramatic turn in their historic chase would soon shift the glare entirely onto one of them, and its heat would take a terrible toll. As the 1961 Major League Baseball season entered the home stretch, the surprising Cincinnati Reds found themselves leading the National League.
No one expected it in spring training. No one expected it in May, June, or July. It wasn't probably till August that people really said that, well, we do have a chance.
In mid-September, the Reds opened a 4.5-game lead over the Giants and Dodgers. With Frank Robinson leading the way, it sometimes seemed the Reds just couldn't lose.
When the game was on the line, he'd steal you that base. He'd hit that home run. I think because we played in the Midwest, he never got his due.
As the most unheralded of the National League's new stars, Robinson finally took center stage in 1961 as he led the Reds to the pennant, capturing the MVP.
Did I have something to prove? Yes.
There it goes, a bullet-like drive over the left field screen for Robbie's 34th home run of the season.
I've been in the shadows of Mays, Clemente, Aaron, those guys, and it's not a bad shadow to be in, but still you want to be out and see the sunlight yourself once in a while. And winning the pennant and winning the MVP award kind of said, hey, Frank Robinson is a pretty good ball player himself.
If there was a team that could understand what Robinson was feeling, it was the Detroit Tigers, and they're hitting star Norm Cash. Despite playing in the shadow of the M&M boys, Cash would register a league-leading .361 batting average in '61.
Mantle and Maris in New York, there's a big difference in New York than Detroit, and they got a lot of publicity. Of course, we thought Norm Cash was at that time the best player in the American League. That year that he had was one of the great years that I've ever seen any player have.
Detroit rolled into Yankee Stadium Labor Day weekend, a game and a half behind New York. If Cash and Detroit wanted to grab the spotlight from Mantle and Maris, now was the time.
Again, it's the ever-dangerous Al Kaline giving the ball a tremendous ride.
The Tigers were good, but not good enough. Mantle and Maris each had a 2-home-run game as New York swept Detroit.
And the ball is going,
The pennant race was over, but the battle between Ruth, Maris, and Mantle was in full swing.
The big Yankee news is Maris 56, Mantle 53.
And then, suddenly in late September, Mantle pulled out of the race. An infection in his hip had made it impossible for him to play. Yet another injury had prevented Mickey from reaching what had seemed to many to be his destiny.
As a result of Mickey having to drop out of that home run race, Roger was on his own. Roger was all by himself.
If Ruth was going to be dethroned, it was not going to be by the fair-haired prince and lifelong Yankee. Instead, it would be the other guy.
He's not supposed to be the one to do this. Nobody should really do this. Oh, please don't do it. Or couldn't it be somebody else? Or basically, couldn't we just let Babe Ruth have that record?
There's a drive to deep right, and there's number 57, Roger Maris.
It amazed me that there was so many people around the country that didn't want to see Roger break that record.
Imagine Yankee fans going to Yankee Stadium and booing Roger Maris, who had 55 home runs.
People are booing you and screaming at you, and that makes it pretty tough on a man.
Meanwhile, the press coverage was only intensifying.
They had reporters coming from Japan and Europe and Australia, hundreds and hundreds of reporters asking the same question to him, which was, are you going to break Babe Ruth's record?
All your time before the ball game is spent with the photographers, and after the ball game it's the writers, and before the game it's the writers.
Some days I was there 3-4 hours after a ball game, just sitting there with interviews.
I don't think there's ever been a player in the history of sports who's had as much pressure over the length of time that Roger did.
He's getting hate messages, people calling his hotel room. He's losing his hair.
On September 20th, the Yankees played the Orioles in their 154th game. Maris had 58 homers, needing to hit 2 that night to tie the Babe and do it in the length of the season that Ruth had played.
On the 154th ball game, he and I went to the ballpark together, and he was a nervous wreck.
He came to me and told me, he said he just couldn't play tonight.
Houck eventually convinced Maris to play, and he drew closer to Ruth in the 3rd inning.
There's one. It is going. It is going. It is gone. Number 59.
In the 7th inning, he hit a towering drive into the Baltimore night, but the ball and Maris would fall short. He hadn't beaten Ruth's pace, but he still could have the record as well as the asterisk that came with it.
There are still 8 Yankee games to be played in the expanded schedule, but the baseball commissioner says Ruth's record must be broken during a schedule that matches the one in the year he made his mark.
On September 26th, Maris hit his 60th home run.
And it is number 60. How about that?
He was now 1 home run away from baseball immortality.
The countdown continued throughout the last games of the season. Game 159, 160, 161, they all passed. And still Roger Maris did not connect with that big one. The tension built right up to the last game of the season. This was Maris' last chance.
October 1st, 1961. Game number 162.
I imagine after all this is over, somebody may write a story about the month-long, day in, day out, excruciating pressure.
To just think back that day now, I tell you, I was so mentally tired and wore.
In the 4th inning, he walked into the batter's box against Red Sox rookie Tracy Stallard.
Just standing up, waiting to see if Maris is going to hit number 61.
Now, all of us are on the threshold of the greatest performance in baseball history.
Here's the windup. Fastball hit deep to right. This could be it. Way back there. Oh,
Roger just put his head down. He didn't jump in the air. He didn't wave his hands. He played it like all the other home runs he had hit in that season.
A standing ovation for Roger Maris. They are standing and asking Roger to come out. Come out, Roger. How about it?
So people kept clapping. The guys trying to push me out of the dugout, and I was embarrassed to go out there, you know. Really, I was embarrassed to go out there.
Meanwhile, Mantle could only watch his teammate on television from the hospital.
I would like to say that I think that's the greatest single feat I've ever seen in my life when he hit those 61 home runs.
As the ball went into the right field stands, tears just ran down Mickey's face for two reasons. One, because his teammate and friend Roger had done it, and because he knew that he, Mickey, had blown the opportunity to become the greatest single-season home run hitter of all time as a result of this injury.
Seemed like I spent all my time in the hospital watching somebody else play.
If it was bittersweet for Mantle, for Maris, it was something else.
We were all watching Roger, and you could just see this sigh of relief going, it's over, it's over.
When the game was over, they brought Mrs. Ruth down by the clubhouse, and Raj, he whispered something in her ear. He said, Mrs. Ruth, don't feel badly. Nobody will replace the Babe.
The most dramatic home run chase in baseball history was complete. But for the Yankees, the drama wasn't. With Mantle injured and Maris exhausted, the team now had to rally to regain what it wanted most, the championship. As the 1961 World Series got set to open in New York, the Cincinnati Reds were brimming with confidence, looking to do what the Pirates had done to the Yankees a year earlier, and what the Reds themselves had done to the National League. And the Yankees? They had a big problem. Mickey Mantle was still hurt.
He was weak, he was very pale, I remember, and the feeling was he'd never make it to the series.
Starting the series without their best player was cause for anxiety. But sending 25-game winner Whitey Ford to the mound for Game 1 was helpful in calming Yankee fears.
We had Whitey. If it went 7 games, I was going to pitch him at least 3. And that was our ace in the hole.
And putting Ford out there for Game 1 immediately paid dividends.
He was tough. He was like a surgeon. Just kind of cut us up and we didn't know we were bleeding. And he totally dominated the game.
Ford blanked the Reds 2-0.
Ford has his third straight World Series shutout.
He'd have a chance to make history later in the series. But the Yankees had to send someone else to the mound in Game 2. And against Ralph Terry, Cincinnati's bats heated up. It was time for the bomber hitters to respond. And without Mantle, they desperately needed something from Roger Maris.
Strikes out Maris, and Raj walks off in disgust.
Roger Maris was physically and emotionally exhausted.
Resurgent Reds pitcher Joey J had led the National League in wins. And now he silenced all the Yankee bats as Cincinnati evened the series.
I pretty much shut them down. I think they ended up with 4 hits or something like that.
Suddenly, the mighty Yanks didn't seem so mighty.
Joey J was the guy that beat us, and he said he wished the Yankees were in the National League. They wouldn't last too far long in the standings.
Back in Cincinnati, the atmosphere was festive as the Reds were hosting a World Series game for the first time in 21 years. And the Reds shared their fans' enthusiasm for World Series glory.
Going back to Cincinnati, we definitely thought we had the upper hand.
After sitting out the first 2 games, Mickey Mantle had seen enough, deciding that no matter how much pain he was in, he was going to play. But as the game began, Mantle's presence in the lineup didn't seem to matter, as knuckleballer Bob Perky baffled the Yanks.
Perky was pitching so well that we thought we had the game in hand.
With the Reds leading 2-1, with 2 outs in the 8th inning, they were just 4 outs away from taking a series lead. Then Johnny Blanchard was summoned to pinch hit.
I was looking for my bat, and Mickey Mantle was standing by the bat rack. And he said, John, he's going to throw you a slider, first pitch for a strike, a hard slider. And then he's going to come back with the knuckleball. Well, I'm telling you right now, I couldn't hit a knuckleball. If Bob Perky would have thrown the ball in the press box, I'd have jumped up and swung at it. I was swinging at the first pitch because Mickey Mantle told me. Well, sure enough, here comes a hard slider for a strike.
Blanchard swings at the first pitch and sends a towering fly deep to right field. Frank Robinson goes back, but the ball sails over the bleacher fence for a pinch hit home run. And the score is deadlocked at 2-2.
And circle of bases, and all the guys are happy, you know. Mickey's still standing down by the bat rack. He wasn't smiling either. He said, "Hey, Blanche." I said, "Yeah." He said, "You owe me a 6-pack of Pepsi." I said, "Oh, man, I'll get you a case."
The Yankees had pulled even. And as the game moved into the 9th, Roger Maris stepped to the plate, yet to record even a hit in the series.
There's one. It is deep to right field, and that ball is going, it is gone. Roger Maris gets his first hit of the series.
He hits the home run that puts the Yankees ahead with some mystical strength, some magic that he still had left in his body.
Maris's homer would give the Yankees the victory in Game 3. And for the 4th game, they sent out Whitey Ford to put a stranglehold on the series. Like Maris and Mantle, Ford had a chance to break one of Babe Ruth's records, consecutive scoreless innings pitched in World Series play.
Before the game in Cincinnati, writers said, "Well, you're going for the record today," and I had no idea what they were talking about.
While Ford didn't receive the attention his teammates had, he did break the record, and he continued to frustrate the Reds.
And that makes 30 straight scoreless innings.
For support, Mantle made a timely contribution in the Yanks' crucial rally to help give Ford the only run he would need. But it came with a price.
Manager Houck decides that the courageous Mantle has gone as far as he can.
You know Mickey, he's one of them guys that you couldn't hardly get him out of a ball game, and he was going to stay in there. But I was really worried when I saw all the blood. That was scary.
Gosh, there was a spot about 5 inches, or about that big around, of blood coming through his shorts and his uniform.
I finally realized how courageous this guy was to even want to play in that condition, but that's what I remember most about that series, not so much beating Babe Ruth's record.
Like Maris, Mantle had given the Yanks just enough. In the 5th game, New York would have enough without him as they exacted their revenge on Joey J.
Deep to right field, and it is gone. Jay, so effective the last time, is shaken up.
The Bronx Bombers knocked Jay out in the 1st inning and routed the Reds, taking the series in 5 games.
And it's all over. The Yankees win 13-5, and once again are world champions.
Why did you think of this Yankee championship team as the greatest on which you played?
Well, I'd have to go along with that. We had the long ball this year, more than any team has ever hit, and I thought
The series capped one of the most remarkable seasons in history and crowned one of the greatest teams ever.
Anybody that says there was a better team than that, I'd have to disagree with them. There might have been one as good, but I don't think anybody could ever have been better.
After their World Series loss to the Yankees in 1961, the Cincinnati Reds fell back into the NL Pac for several years and wouldn't return to the postseason until 1970, with a group of players who would win back-to-back series titles as the Big Red Machine in 1975 and 76.
Cincinnati Reds win the World Series.
By that time, Frank Robinson was long gone from Cincinnati. The only player ever to win the MVP award in both leagues, he made more history in 1975 when he became the first black manager in Major League history with the Indians. As for the Yankees, they would win another World Championship in 1962, followed by 2 more AL pennants in 63 and 64. Then the team of the century hit a rough patch and floundered for much of the next decade. Whitey Ford's consecutive scoreless innings streak in the World Series would eventually reach 33 2/3 innings. That would remain the all-time mark until 2000, when it was broken by another postseason Yankee great, Mariano Rivera.
33 1/3 consecutive scoreless innings in the playoffs and World Series.
Ford's teammate Mickey Mantle would win his 3rd and final MVP in 1962. And as Mantle gutted his way through another 7 seasons after the epic chase of '61, his transformation from Yankee hero to baseball icon continued.
It turned out that no less than 14 teammates had named their own sons Mickey, and you couldn't get a higher compliment than that.
Roger Maris played in New York for 5 more seasons, but never got comfortable in the spotlight. He'd eventually be traded to St. Louis, where he won another World Series ring in 1967. 30 years after the '61 season, Commissioner Fay Vincent finally declared Maris the sole official single-season home run record holder.
Removing the asterisk from Maris's record is actually one of the prouder achievements that we at the Elias Bureau were happy to have a role in, and recognize him for what he was, the single-season all-time home run hitter.
Maris never lived to see anyone seriously challenge his record. But in 1998, Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa waged a dramatic battle all season in pursuit of '61. And with members of the Maris family in attendance, it all culminated on September 8th at Busch Stadium.
He pointed up to the sky, tapped his heart, and the way I interpreted that was his acknowledging Dad, saying Dad was in his heart. In such a big moment in Mark McGwire's life, to include that in that special moment was something we'll never forget.
In 2001, the home run record would be broken once again by Barry Bonds.
He's the new king of the home run world.
Over the past decade, allegations that both McGwire and Bonds may have used performance-enhancing drugs have led many to still view Maris's record as the true all-time mark, nearly half a century after it was set. Even in the shadow of baseball's modern-day power surge, the amazing season of '61 still resonates. A year when home runs soared out of ballparks all across the game, capped by an epic chase that will be remembered forever for its uncommon drama and unlikely victor.